there, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, on my channel I talk about Broadway books and television. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over all the books I read in January, February of 2026, my reading wrap-up for those months. I wasn't really planning on doing reading wrap-ups on my channel anymore, just because I do spoiler-free book reviews for every book that I read, so at a certain point it seemed like unnecessary. But the thing is, I'm so far behind with making book reviews for books that I read in 2026 because I'm still in the process of making book reviews for books that I read in 2025. So I knew it was going to be some time before I got around to reviewing any of the books that I'll be talking about here today. So I thought at least in the meantime I would make a reading wrap up for what I've read in January and February, and give you an idea of what I've been reading this year so far, because I personally always find it fun to hear what people are reading about. So I thought someone might enjoy this. And this won't be a very detailed reading wrap up where I really go in depth on what the books are about and my thoughts on them, because like I said, I plan on making spoiler-free reviews for these books where I will go more in depth on what the books are about and my thoughts on them. Without any further ado, let's get on to what I read in January, February 2026. So in January, I read a total of 4 books. The first book I did start reading towards the end of December, but I finished it in January, so I'm counting it as a book I read in January. And that would be Secrets Never Die by Vincent Ralph. This is a YA mystery thriller that I really liked a lot. Growing up, Are You Afraid of the Dark was one of my favorite TV shows, and reading this book just reminded me of that show so much. It had a very fun, spooky vibe to it. The book also starts on Halloween, so if you're a fan of reading, books when that time that the book is takes place in, I would highly recommend reading this at Halloween. The book that I read was The Other Mistress by Shannara Williams. This is a psychological thriller that had twists and turns that I truly did not see coming. The story was very much written like a Lifetime movie, and overall I thought it was a really good psychological thriller. The next book that I read was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I absolutely love this book. This book is a very highly talked about, very popular book, very hyped up book, and after reading it, I can say I understand why. It was one of the best mystery thrillers that I have ever read. I tried to wait until after I fully finished reading a book before I, really look into how other people like the book, and after reading it, it seems like people either really love this book or they don't like it, and I can understand why. There is a really interesting twist that happens within the story that takes the story in a very different direction than you thought it was going in. Personally, I really like this twist. It was very unexpected and very caught me by surprise, and I always like that when books are able to really, catch you by surprise. And yeah, I love this book a lot. In case you didn't know, it's going to be adapted into, I believe, a movie at some point, and I'm so looking forward to the adaptation because I really love this book a lot. The last book that I read in January was Stone Cold Fox, which is a suspense thriller that I absolutely love. This is definitely the kind of book where you don't want to put it down once you start to read it. It's definitely a great book to read in one sitting because it's just very much a page turner. What really stands out in this book, besides all those things I just mentioned, is the main character. One of the most memorable main characters I've read about a book in quite some time. I'll say the main character's a bit on the unlikable side. Didn't change my feelings on how much I love the book. It was just such a good book. And I believe this book is going to be adapted into a television series, and I really cannot wait because I really like this book a lot. So that's what I read in January. Now moving on to February, I read 3 books. I did start a 4th book, which I will let you know what it is, but I won't go into detail on how I liked it because I'll say that for the next reading wrap-up and eventually a spoiler-free review. So the first book I read in February was Dead Girls Can't Tell Secrets. This is a YA mystery thriller that I thought was really good. The pacing of the story was really well done, where it was a very fast-paced, very much a page-turner. You never knew exactly where the story was going to go. And I will say, I didn't love the main character that much when the story first started, but the more and more I read of the book, the more and more, the main character didn't bother me as much as they did when the book first started. And now for the next book that I read in February, that would be Swear on This Life, which is a friends to lovers second chance romance that I absolutely loved. Though it took me about 80 or so pages to really start to like the book because I didn't really like the characters. But once I got past that point, I was fully invested in the story, and it's definitely one of my favorite romances now that I've ever read. On to the last book I read in February, which is What Happens After Midnight, which is a YA second chance romance that was just such a fun book. The romance was so incredibly sweet, and it's nice once in a while to read a book that's not like super heavy or like super serious. The book does have a serious moment within the story, but it's not written about in a way where it's like super heavy, but it's still heavy, but you know what I mean. It wasn't as heavy as other books I read. So it was refreshing to read a book that was like just simply fun. Those are the books I read in February. The last book that I started reading in February but didn't finish until March was The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. Didn't realize this until I was, I think, reading The X-Files, that I read 3 second chance romances in a row, which was not at all on purpose. It just, that's what those are the books that I just happened to read. I just found it to be a fun coincidence, and I didn't even like pick them to read because it was like the month of Valentine's Day in February. It just like, that's what I felt like reading, and so that's what I read. January and February were really good reading months for me. I really liked everything I read. Like I said earlier in the video, I definitely plan on making spoiler-free book reviews for every book that I talked about here today, where I talk more in depth on what the books are about and my thoughts on them. But because I already know it's going to be quite some time before I get to these spoiler-free book reviews, I wanted to, in the meantime, you know, let you know what I read in January, February, and I'm probably going to end up doing these kind of reading wrap-ups, you know, throughout the year, where I briefly go over what I read before the spoiler-free reviews, just because I know it's going to be a while before I get to these spoiler-free reviews. It takes me a while to put my thoughts together for what I want to say. So, yeah, that's kind of why. I'm going to be on a delay with all my reviews this year. Let me know in the comments if you read any of the books that I talked about here today, or what books did you read in January, February, or do you have any good book recommendations? I always love talking about books and hearing what people are reading, so yeah, be sure to leave me a comment on what you've been reading, or if you have any good recommendations. So yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope to help you discover a new book today along the way as well. And until next time, bye.